Hey there, welcome back to this week's episode of the C-Town Podcast, where Seattle business owners, entrepreneurs, and community leaders are invited on to share their stories with us. I'm your host, Christian Harris. This week's episode of the C-Town Podcast is brought to you by C-Town Real Estate. Their mission to make a difference extends beyond just their unique and unconventional approach with their clients and their agents. They partner with the community to give back a percentage of the proceeds from each home sale to a local nonprofit of their client's choice. Visit ctown.com, sea-town.com, and experience the difference with C-Town Real Estate today. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the C-Town Podcast. Today I'm joined by Erin Dury Moore, the Executive Director of the West Seattle Helpline, which is a community-based nonprofit putting a stop to homelessness before it starts in West Seattle and White Center. They do that through emergency services to families and individuals. Now, I found out about the West Seattle Helpline a few years ago. I think the executive director at the time, Chris Langler, I think I met him at maybe a chamber event or something around West Seattle, and I was really impressed by the model, but it doesn't seem like it. At the time, it had a lot of press, so not a lot of people knew about that as a awesome kind of hyper local resource. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the West Seattle Helpline, what made you get involved with it, kind of what the origin story is, a little bit of the organization.
Yeah. So the West Seattle Helpline is one of a few helplines in Seattle. There's the Queen Anne Helpline, the North Helpline, and the Ballard Food Bank also has a helpline in it. And Queen Anne and West Seattle were started around the same time from folks at Met Market, who were seeing that people really were having to choose between whether or not they could buy food or pay their rent or pay their utility bills. And so folks got together and said, as a community, we can do better. And we can help folks stay in their homes with just a small assistance. Sometimes, $80 is all they need to make up for the missed rent or something like that. So it started, this is actually our 30th year. Right. We turned 30 this year, yeah. So in those 30 years, we've grown a lot. I hear that at the beginning, the assistance could be like maybe $25 and only a handful of people would get that in a given month. Okay. At this point, our average assistance for rent, utility, or move-in deposit is about $300. And we are able to serve 100% of the eligible folks who call at this point. And we've been doing that for about 3 years now. To awesome. Your point, I think a couple years ago, people didn't know about the helpline as much. And in the last few years, starting with Chris and moving from that momentum, we've really been trying to get out and make sure that people know that we're here, which is doing a couple things. More folks know that they can call if they need some help. And also more people know that there are different ways to support the community. And so we're able to do more in that way to help our neighbors. We also have a clothesline, which is a free clothing bank for any age person. And folks can come in 4 times a year and shop for clothing for themselves and anybody else in their household. Okay. And like I said, it's free. And then we also give out bus tickets. So those are our main programs that we run. And all of that is run through the support of our fabulous community and the amazing volunteers. So the hotline is fully staffed by volunteers, and the clothesline is also fully staffed by volunteers. Okay. And so the staff is there to make the operations of the business keep going, essentially, and review the applications. How I came into the helpline, I was in Eugene before moving up to Seattle. My entire career has been in nonprofits. Okay. I've done everything from working with low-income folks getting access to mental health help, to coaching a crew team for youth. And most recently, before this job, I worked with child welfare and saw the impacts of homelessness on families in the child welfare system and the detrimental outcomes that cross all sectors when homelessness is a factor. Sure. And so when I moved up here and saw the homeless issue in Seattle, as we all know, is always growing, it seems like, and becoming an ever more problem as we're displacing folks from homes and gentrifying neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff. And so started trying to figure out, what are the agencies that are working to make sure that this isn't happening. And I met Chris through a networking and had an amazing conversation with him about the prevention model of the helpline and how it really is about stopping homelessness before it starts, where we keep folks in their homes. We make sure that they never have to enter the cycle of homelessness or have any of those outcomes. So I thought that was just amazing. Yeah. And, as I said, our average assistance is about $300. And the city came out with a report within the last year or two that said it could cost up to $32,000 to rehome somebody in this city at this point. And so, just on a economic level for the city, it makes so much sense. But then also just as a human, I can't imagine, what would happen if I had myself and my child and I had to figure out a housing situation in this city without any resources or support. Sure. And so on a human level too, it's just such a better model, in my opinion, to keep people in their homes. Yeah. And
not disrupt your life.
Right, exactly. So that's a bit about the history of the helpline and what brought me to it. Okay.
What brought you to Seattle if it wasn't the helpline, if you found out about it after you moved to Seattle?
I had lived in Eugene for a long time, and my family was ready for a different scene and more opportunity. So we moved up here to seek that. And my son at the time was entering kindergarten, so it was a really good time to sort of transition him.
Sure. Now it sounds like, the clothesline and the helpline are largely volunteer run. Where do you guys get your support from, whether it's the clothes or the money to be able to provide assistance?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things about the helpline actually is that it is a hyper local model. And the West Seattle community is such a tight-knit and astounding community. We care very much about our neighbors, and we want to make sure our neighbors stay in our community. So all the clothing is local. Folks from the neighborhoods come and drop it off at the clothesline, which is in the Junction area. And all the volunteers are local from the West Seattle area, as are our board members, So it really is a West Seattle organization.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you guys do regular annual fundraising drives, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we have two major events that happen. Taste of West Seattle is coming up this May 23rd on Thursday. And that's a really fun event at the Hall at Fauntleroy where the local West Seattle White Center restaurants, bars, breweries, wineries, things like that come. And they come with little food bites or little sips of beer or wine or some mocktails, things like that. Sure. It's a 21 and over event, but it's really fun, and it just really brings the community together. It's great for our folks to come and see what's happening in the food area in West Seattle, and also see your neighbors and have some fun. And then our second major event is the Neighbors Helping Neighbors Dinner, which is in October. It's October 12th of this year. And that's a cocktail hour, live and silent auction, dinner, presentation about the organization. We also give our Neighbor of the Year award at that event. And it's also really fun. It's a little bit more... a sit-down dinner type style. Sure. And then we also have different clothing drives that happen throughout the year. And like I said, the community is amazing. So CMP Coffee does one. One of the West Side School is going to be doing a drive for us this spring. And so different clothing drives happen throughout the year. Okay. Lots of coat drives from Kiwanis and different service organizations and the churches happen So it's really the community coming together. And then, as a nonprofit, a lot of our funding comes from our local businesses and neighbors who give individually. Sure. And that's what goes to our financial assistance program. So we're able to pay rent and utilities for folks based on those donations and the generosity of the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love the hyper local model of that. That's pretty awesome. I mean, when you took on the mantle of executive directors last year, was there anything kind of unexpected about that role, or something surprising you found? Obviously you're hoping to kind of tackle homelessness preemptively as opposed to waiting until it becomes a crisis and then trying to tackle it that way, which obviously is a lot harder, a lot more disruptive to people and costs a lot more money. So is there anything kind of surprising you found taking on this role?
I wouldn't say there's anything surprising in the role. I think that what's been interesting over the last year and a half that I've been in this role is to see how the conversation around homelessness is changing throughout the city. I think there has been a lot of focus on how do we get people off the streets, and that conversation has been happening for a while. We're starting to see a shift, especially in this legislative session, of people really talking about how do we prevent. And so our model is coming more to the forefront of the conversation now, which has been, and clearly in my opinion, a great thing to happen. Yep. And so it's been really interesting to see how the conversation in the city is changing, how the conversation with our elected officials is changing, and to be a part of that conversation and say, okay, how do we really, if we're going to look at prevention in this way, how do we really make the impacts to all the folks who are experiencing, who are getting eviction notices or on the cusp or experiencing shut-off notices or things like that? How do we really come to the community in a way that meets folks where they're at, as opposed to waiting until they've been evicted, or even in the prevention model, waiting until folks who have like an eviction come to the courthouse, which is a great step that we're talking about, and it's fabulous. But where does our neighborhood-based hyper-local model fit into that conversation, and what section of the conversation are we fulfilling that isn't being looked at yet?
Sure. Okay.
So that's been a really interesting, and it's ongoing. That conversation is happening right now. And so I think that's been really probably the most interesting thing to sort of wrap my brain around and have the organization participate in a meaningful way.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a encouraging aspect of, the added conversation that's going on in the city and with legislators. Is there kind of a flip side of that? Like, what's been the most challenging aspect of this role or this job or helping, the people you help?
Yeah. Well, it's always challenging to make sure, like I said, we are helping 100% of the clients of eligible neighbors, which is great. But the amount of money folks need has gone up. I mean, just in the time I've been there, it's gone up. Sure. And anecdotally, but I do know from our data, like over the course of time, the amount of rent requests, in the dollar amount, not the number of, but the dollar amount of rent requests is just going up. Yeah. And so how do we have our budget and work with that to help as many folks as we can in a way that is preventing eviction? And so we've been working with community partners a lot more and trying to streamline that process and say, okay, how do we work together to make sure we can get these amounts? And also, in our city, you get a 3-day eviction notice. How do we turn it around fast enough? Sure. So that's another part of the challenges that we face is, we're really looking at how do we advocate meaningfully in this conversation, and how do we also live within the reality of what an eviction process, for example, looks like in this city, and how do we play a meaningful role to really prevent that for people, is challenging.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Can you share maybe a story with us that captures kind of the essence of what the West Seattle Helpline does to help the individuals of West Seattle?
Yeah. So, we get on the financial assistance side of things, we get requests. It's a one-time emergency needs is our mission. And so we're really helping folks who have some sort of unforeseen situation happen, or folks who, live right on that edge of living paycheck to paycheck, and, kiddo is out sick, and so parent can't go to work for a couple of days, and that's all it takes. Sometimes it really is just like $80, So and in terms of like one of these, a story of folks that we work with who have a greater need, we have people who come in who need $2,500, $4,000 because there's like maybe they got injured at work, or they had some sort of more severe illness, and it took them out of work for a while, and now they're trying to get back up to speed and on their feet again. And so, clients will come in with a request like that, and after we go through a screening process, after that we have a couple community partners, St. Vincent de Paul. We work with them often, and the West Side Interfaith Network is another amazing community group that we work with, and it's phone calls to them saying, hey, what can we do together? This is how much we're able to put towards this, and what can you do, and really work with the client as well. People are motivated to stay in their homes, and they go and find resources and support from other folks as well as other organizations, and so we just try to be that hub of making sure everything lines up in a case where it takes a lot of different partners to get to the amount we need to get to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. It sounds like a very satisfying line of work, to know that you're making a difference tangibly in, so many people's lives every day. Kind of getting to maybe a little bit more of the personal side of your story. It's great you're able to, it sounds like, help 100% of the people that make requests, so it doesn't sound like a super frustrating business like it might be if there's a greater need than you're able to provide for. But those times that you do need to, blow off some steam or have some fun, or, get some you time, how do you spend your time? What do you like to do?
Well, I have a son, so hanging out with him and just going into kid space is always really fun. But mostly I'm also a runner, and so I take my time and go on runs. Actually, it's sort of known with my personally with friends and also with the staff, if there's a real issue we're tackling or something I'm trying to process, I'm like, okay, I'll be back, and I just kind of take off for a while. And it's been really great. I've only lived in Seattle for 3 years, and that's how I've gotten to know the city. I just start running, and I get lost sometimes and have to figure out how to get back, and have gotten to see some great neighborhoods, and anywhere on sound is amazingly beautiful to run. So really gotten to know the city that way, which has been good.
Sounds like a nice way to discover areas of Seattle.
Yeah.
What do you love most about West Seattle?
The community. I have been a community-oriented, focused person my whole life. I build community wherever I go. When I moved up here, the hardest part was leaving the community I had built from home before. And, in any of the moves I've made, it's fun to learn a new place, but it's great to build community and have people. And the community of West Seattle is unique. And when I moved up here, people would tell me that, West Seattle's unique. And I'm like, yeah, everybody says that, but it is, it really is. We're within a city, it really is just a small town neighborhood, and folks here, like we've talked about, folks here are very interested in keeping that community feeling alive, and do work actively to make sure that happens. Mm-hmm. And so, in work, we see that every day, where people just keep stepping up and showing up for our neighbors. And you can see that just wandering around, all the different little sections of West Seattle too. People are just wherever they go. And, it's just, it's a unique community.
Right. So you said you've lived in Seattle for a few years now, and you're in Eugene for like 15 years before that. Where are you originally from? What's been kind of your trajectory around
I just keep going north, apparently. I grew up in the Bay Area of near San Francisco in California, and lived there until the end of high school, and then I left pretty quickly. It was just not my speed.
Okay.
And so moved to Eugene, and then got to slow down a lot there, which was great. And Seattle seems to be the perfect middle ground of all of it for me.
Okay.
Also, apparently, I don't like hot weather, so I'm just going to keep going north, apparently.
It will keep getting colder, yeah.
Yep.
What would you say is maybe some of the best advice you've ever received, either professionally or personally? I mean, it sounds like you come from a nonprofit background.
Yeah, I've been super fortunate to work with amazing people in the sector. And I think, honestly, the best piece of advice professionally I ever got was to remember it's just a job. I think in the nonprofit sector, that's really hard to, and I don't know that I fully commit to it actually, but it's really hard to feel like it's just a job, because you care. I care so much about the work I do. Everybody in the sector, we all care about, that's why we do what we do, and we want to see the change that we're working for so much, but you can really burn out. Burnout in the nonprofit sector is abundant. And I, to be fair, haven't worked in any other sectors, so it could be true in others as well. But, but for me, it was just a really great reminder to, keep my work at work as much as possible, to remember to cherish and value my time with my kiddo, to, remember that having things to do like running or some hobby or something that is external to all of it is also, really important. And it wasn't advice that I took when I heard it. It did take me just getting to the end of like, I just can't do this. And even thought about leaving the nonprofit sector altogether. And, I built my whole career on that. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to take some time and slow down and like reevaluate. And that was the piece of advice that really stood out at that moment. And so when I went back, I was like, okay, but I do need to keep some boundaries.
Sure.
And it's not just about time. It's about your mental health. It's about, unplugging. It's about remembering that, when like for homelessness, for example, we're talking about something that I may not see a full solution to in my lifetime.
Sure. But
that doesn't mean the work doesn't need to get done, and it doesn't mean that we can't move the needle in very significant ways. And and so just to remember those smaller goals and steps, and to celebrate those successes along the way as well.
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like to think about it in the context of like, there's always going to be suffering. There's always going to be homelessness. There's always going to be poverty. But what can I do? Kind of what's my role and mission? Like whose lives can I affect?
Yeah.
That's what I'm responsible for. I'm not responsible for the entire world's homeless population. I'm responsible for like, what can I do with the resources that I have? And it'll keep you sane, otherwise you just can spiral down to depression and hopelessness,
Yeah. And I think, with social media now, there are lots of quotes and memes and things that are reminders to focus on what you can and what you do, and not to get overwhelmed by the much larger picture, and to remember that this piece of what you do is a piece of the bigger puzzle.
Right.
And that's true for the Helpline. Like we do a piece of prevention. We do not solve all of homelessness in Seattle. That's going to take a network of lots of agencies and lots of great minds and
working together and doing it one person at a time, one individual at a time, one family at a time.
Right. Yeah. So.
I like that. So, I mean, as you've, learned that lesson to not, burn out for the sake of the work you do, what would you say is like a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I do keep my evenings and my weekends. I mean, as much, yeah, I do keep my time. In the nonprofit world, you're working evenings and weekends pretty frequently. And so I have structured evenings that are like no-go zones. The nights I have my kiddo, like, I'm pretty hard pressed to do anything other than go home and hang out with him.
Sure.
And if there is time on weekends, I just am careful with how much it is. I'm much more aware of it. So it's very much a timing thing. I used to, come wake up really early and work out and get my kid to school and go to work and get him home. And then as soon as he was in bed, start working again and go to bed really late. And, and now I'm just like, nope, if it can't, part of it also is just being realistic about what we can do. No individual person can change anything at that level, especially, and you can spin your wheels, but you're just, at some point it's going to break down.
Yeah.
And so I've just gotten really good at keeping my time. And also, like I said, community is really important to me. So I do things to make sure I'm engaging with my friends and my family, and bringing community together. I love any time where a house is full of people or a space is full of people who are chatting and getting along and sharing a meal or, having a good time together. And so I try really hard to make sure I'm putting that in my life as much as possible as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sounds like we could all learn that lesson. I know I probably overwork and, especially owning a business, there's always more work to do.
There's always more.
You gotta draw your boundaries. So.
Yeah, there's always going to be more.
Right.
That same mentor she used to tell me all the time, there's always tomorrow. Which, you don't want to put all of life off till tomorrow, but every once in a while when you have to prioritize, it's a good thing to remember.
Sure. Do you listen to podcasts?
I do, on occasion.
What's your favorite?
Pod Save the People.
Okay.
Is my favorite. And Pod Save America is also really good. And then...
What are those about?
Pod Save the People is done by Dre, I can't remember his last name, and Brittany Packnetty. They were some of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's really about, it's evolved, I feel like, over time, but I would say at this point they really take current affairs and dive deep into what does that mean for race in America, and how is that upholding racism, and how are we or how are we deconstructing racism, and it's I've learned so much from it, and it's I feel like a really great analysis of what's going on. They bring in politics clearly often,
sure.
And so I think it's a great way to learn about what's going on in the politics of America and how they're really good about bringing in the history of how we got here, and so it centers it and grounds it for me in a way, and that you can see how it's going to project out into the future and whether or not that's a good thing or not, and
sure.
How do I participate in that? Pod Save America is also very political. They are a little more comical, I would say, but it's also like on that political bent. And then other than that, it's like I'll listen to an episode here or there that people are like, oh, you'd really like this topic or something.
Sure. Okay. Do you have a favorite movie?
I don't sit still very well. And so most of my movie time is now consumed by movies that are appropriate for an 8-year-old. Okay. He's really into Star Wars, which is just not my jam. And then let's see. Most of the Marvel movies that are out, I've probably seen most of those. But I am hard pressed to sit through a movie.
Okay.
Actually, yeah.
Is it easier for you to sit through a book?
I love to read.
Okay.
I think I have 3 or 4 books I'm currently reading all at the same time. But yeah, I do love reading. I recently read Nightingale, which is a World War II novel. And that was great. And then, so you want to talk about race? I think that was the title of it. I read that one recently. And then I just started Emergent Strategies. Somebody recommended that to me. I couldn't really tell you what it's about yet. Like, I literally just cracked it the other day. So, but yeah, most of the books I get are either given to me, or that I read are either given to me as gifts, which is my favorite, or somebody's like, you would love this. Or, yeah.
As we wrap up here, can you share one piece of parting guidance or words of wisdom with our audience?
Words of wisdom. Ooh,
yeah.
That's a lot of pressure. Well, I think sort of to the theme of our conversation that we can create change in our world and in our community. And I think it's really easy to feel overwhelmed, especially I feel like these days we get just overwhelmed by the amount of different topics that can take our energy and that need to get moved forward, and we need to see change on. And so to just really remember, like, to that taking the steps, just the little steps it's still good. You're still moving. You're still moving forward. You're still progressing, and being involved where you can, when you can, is good. And also to remember, for the folks who do this a lot, who work in sectors where we try and create change, or who are activists, or who even in their own home are being activists by living their values. Just to remember that we also need to take time for ourselves, and to regroup, and to say, okay, it's okay if I don't do that one thing right now. Sure. It's okay. And that we'll still keep moving. And that's the point. That's the bigger picture, that Sure. we just, as long as we keep moving in the right direction and living our values and being authentic people, we'll get there.
The ball forward.
Yeah.
Okay. If one of our listeners, or hopefully a bunch of our listeners, want to get involved with the West Seattle Helpline, what's the best way to do that, or sign up for one of your upcoming fundraisers? I think we're gonna. Me and my business partner are going to try to make it out of the taste of West Seattle. So
awesome! It's so fun.
Some money for a good cause.
Fun. Yes, it is really fun. Tickets for Taste of West Seattle are actually on sale right now, and we do sell out. That event sells out, so I would definitely go online. Our website is wshelpline.org. And you can get information of all of our events and upcoming opportunities on there. It's also, like I said, we're fairly heavily volunteer run. And so there's a space to sign up to be a volunteer. And we have a couple different volunteer opportunities. We do an orientation every other month for new volunteers to learn about the different opportunities. So that's all on the website. And then, of course, as a nonprofit, we are always looking for financial support from our neighbors. There's a donate option on the website as well. And also all of our social media will direct you back to those opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for your time today, Erin. It's been great sitting down, talking with you. It's a nice refresh. We did interview Chris Langler. I was looking at our notes, and that was back at episode 26, which seems like a ton of time ago, which is over 2 years ago. It was back in December of 2016. So it's nice kind of getting updates, as things have changed and progressed, as far as what we're able to do in the conversation around homelessness in Seattle. Yeah. And it's awesome to hear, the impact you guys are making, locally, one-on-one with families in need. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this too. It's really fun to hear that. I was perusing your podcast, and it's fun to hear all the different people from the community coming out and talking about the ways that's what makes West Seattle, honestly, are all those different folks. So.
Yeah, exactly. The community is strong here. It's great to be part of West Seattle.
It really is.
Well, thanks again, Erin. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That wraps up this week's episode. Make sure to check out our guest website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they are doing. If you have any questions, know someone who should be a guest on here, or has a great story worth sharing, email me at christianharris@seatown.com. That's sea-town.com. I would also love it if you would go to iTunes and give us a review and a nice 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on great guests and provide exceptional content, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rank well on iTunes so others can find and enjoy the show. You can also find out more about me, how my real estate brokerage is breaking the mold and making a difference in our Seattle communities, and other projects I'm working on by visiting seatown.com, sea-town.com. Thanks for listening. The music for our podcast is courtesy of The Fascination Movement. You can find their albums in the iTunes Store. You can also listen to more episodes and find all our show notes on our website at seatownpodcast.com. This has been a Seatown Media production.